Good morning, YouTube. mcfrazzleweiners here. It's about 8 in the morning, Sunday before Labor Day. Little chevelle update. It's been 5-6 months since I've done a video, and that's because we've just been doing the very monotonous process of body work, which is a lot of priming, a lot of body filler, a lot of sanding. It's boring to do a video on it. I really enjoy the work, but that's, you know, it's a long, tedious process. Excuse me, it's early, a little stoned. That's a big part of why I think you see so many abandoned bodywork projects, is because guys get into, you know, a major undertaking like this, and then it's such a tedious process, and it's really hard. Like, if you're married, you know, got any type of life, it's really, really hard to make consistent good progress on this stuff. So I think that, you know, just regular life gets in a lot of guys' way. The average Joe that's trying to do this in his garage, you know, that's a hard thing to pull off. So kudos to anybody that even attempts it. But anyway, that's where we're at with this thing. Really, there's 3 little patch panels. There's one right there, and there's 2 straight up above it. And those were spots where the window lip had rusted through. That one actually created a hole. The 2 up there on the inside of that lip, which you can't see them from here, those are, they were just a little bit of rusty, you know, pinholes. The metal's a little thin, but I was able to weld them up. So just a little bit of finish grinding, and then I've got to go around with my my touch-up gun and re-epoxy that window edge where I've been welding and sanding, and then a couple of spots where I blocked down things to do body work up top. I burned through the epoxy primer back there, so I'll go around that with a little bit of a touch-up. And then these spots, these are high build. There's high build there. There's high build on the opposite side. There's high build right here on the opposite door, and high build right here on the opposite fender, and then high build right there. Those are all areas where I did significant body work, meaning had to get out the body filler. Those lowers are patch panels on each side. I don't know if I did a video on that or not, but they had both rusted out right in there, and what they did is they put patch panels in there, but then they took a hammer, they spot welded them in, and then they took a hammer and beat them in shallow, and then just body fillered it over. And I dinked with it for a couple of hours and just decided that the best thing to do there would be to cut that out and replace those panels. So I did that, got a flanging gun, a flanger, a pneumatic flanger, and created, I didn't butt weld them, I flange welded them, but that, so you can see the repair in the trunk, but it came out really good out here. I think I've still got I don't know, it's hard to tell. I think I got a little bit of a high spot right there. I can feel a little bit of a transition right there, so probably gonna have to do some blending there still. But once that's done, the body is ready for the body is ready for its first stages of high build primer. I'll probably put 3 coats. You know, I'll do a wet coat, tack it, and then do another wet coat, and then let it tack, and then do a 3rd coat of high build, and then I'll start blocking it. And I think by the time we do that twice, I feel pretty good about where this body's at. And it's been a long, tedious process because this is all original sheet metal. The only thing on this car that's not its original sheet metal is going to be the hood, and that's because I'm going to buy the SS dual snorkel hood. I just like them. So, you know, I'm not going to badge out the car. I'm not going to try and say it's an SS car. It's going to have an SS hood on it because I like the way the SS hood looks. And that's it. So, but that's where we're at with the Chevelle. Now, right now, it has had hopefully a fairly short pause button hit, and let's go talk about why. Right there. Since I've been doing the Chevelle videos, we've talked a little bit about the Corvette and talked about what the motor situation was, you know, and why this car was just sitting there getting dirty, collecting dust. Well, you know, the motor was, we did that motor, we started building that motor kind of in the height of the whole, like 2022, 2023 COVID supply house and supply chain issues, meaning there was just a shortage of materials everywhere. So we did wait for some parts for quite a while. The cam was the longest wait, and no fault to the cam grinder or the camshaft company. They did a fantastic job, but they had to wait till their materials came in. And I'm in the supply chain business, so I understand how that goes. I get people breathing down my neck all the time wanting me to, to manifest their HVAC parts because their homeowners are upset. It's like, yeah, hey, sure, that compressor, it's been on back order for 2 months. I'll just run out back and build it for you real quick. I don't know what I was thinking before. So I understand the supply chain issues. We waited 6 or 7 months for that cam. And it's a 55 millimeter core. They were on back order. So real quick, the breakdown on this motor. This is a Foxwell Performance or a Foxwell Motorsports built by Scott Foxwell in Greenville, Tennessee. 532-inch dart block base deal. This is a 4-inch stroke, 4.6 bore. It's 10-to-1 compression. These are my old Canfield cast cylinder heads and intake manifold that were on the previous 496. And that's part of how we landed at the 532 combination was I wanted to build a motor, but I didn't want to spend the money on a set of heads. I wanted to see if I could get the horsepower and the power levels and the ET that I had with the cylinder head castings that I had. So we talked about this 532, and I really liked the idea of it, so we went with it. So it's a 4-inch bore, a 4-inch stroke. That's a stock 454 stroke. It's not a stock GM crank. This is made from good parts. It's not top shelf parts, but this is a good piece. It's a scat crank, but it's one of their upper end cranks. It's about a $1,600 crank, and that was 2021 2022 pricing. I don't know what that crank is now. It's knife edged, 8 counterweight. It's profiled real nice. It's not micro polished. It's not billet. It is a forged piece, but it's a really good piece. Real good oil pan. We went for windage control because we knew that that's a Moroso 20485. Moroso said that's the pan to run for what you're doing. It's about an $800 oil pan. This, and I'm not bragging about how much the parts were, guys. I'm just saying that, I took a lot of time. This is a kind of a dream motor. Took a couple of years for me to collect the parts, to get it built. So I really love this thing. But the 4-inch stroke, 6535 rod, 4.6 bore. It's a Mahl piston. It's a Molnar Power Adder Plus rod. 235 intake valve upgrade in the cylinder heads, and it's either a 180 or a 185 exhaust. I can't remember what he did with those, but those cylinder heads now are in the 335-ish cc range, and they flow north of 400 at an inch of lift. We're using a cam at 790 before lash. The cam lashes in at like 19 or 20, I think, both intake and exhaust. So our net lift, we're about 770 thousandths lift. And it is still a stud mount rocker. I will upgrade this to titanium valves and shaft rockers in a year or two, but that was not in the budget this go around. That's $3,500 or maybe even $4,000, but probably $4,000 pretty easily by the time you have the valve train geometry set up and you get the push rods and all that. That's a $4,000 upgrade, so that's going to have to be next time. But the heads flowed somewhere in the vicinity of like 425 or 430 CFM, and these carburetors, they kind of called me at the last minute and said, hey, I know you like your Pro Systems. He goes, but my carburetor guy is Dominic Thumper. He goes, I do a lot with him, and he's solid, and he's got something new that I've been dying to try. Will you go in and work with me and do these carburetors? I was like, yeah, sure. It's your engine program. I've never been the guy to pay somebody to do work for me and then tell them the right parts to use. It's like, I have an idea what I think I want to go with, but if that's not your recommendation as the professional that I have paid to do the work for me, then I will go with your idea. So it was kind of like a 496 before. I told Patrick James I really wanted one to run 1050 Dominators, and he goes, you're just not there. He goes, if that's what you want, I'll build them for you, but that's not what you need. And I said, no, build me what I need. So these carburetors, anybody that knows your Holley and your Holley style 4150 and 4500 carbs, these are 4150s. New style of booster. This is a bridged booster. It's kind of a hybrid of a down leg and an annular. It has the characteristics of both, and it is a Dominator style that's bridged, but unlike the Dominators where each one is a full bridge, this is a two-piece system. That's one solid piece and that's one solid piece. Now, the other interesting thing about those carbs, anybody that knows this style of carburetor system, you know your jetting is in the metering block. So you got 2 jets per metering block, so 4 jets per carb. These carbs have those, and you can see the metering blocks there, and they have your standard jetting. But the carburetors also have 4 jets in the main bodies themselves. And, you know, we're all still learning how that worked. So, I don't fully know what that extra set of jetting does. I'm going to send Dominic an email or a message and just say, hey, when do you have time to, you know, walk me through what that is? And I contacted Dominic, and he's super good dude, way willing to help. He said, oh yeah, man, just anytime you need tech support or need anything on those carbs, give me a holler. So, you know, he's really into the service after the sale. So far, these carbs are freaking cool. I mean, these things are just engine. Sorry, I thought my dog was knocking something over. So, you know, these new carburetors that they're building now are just engine jewelry. But very, very excited to learn how these carburetors behave and stuff like that. On the dyno, they ran really good. Now, let's talk about the numbers that this motor made. They pulled it from 5,000 to 7,500. This is a 10-to-1 motor. This is a drag week style engine, guys. That's what the desire really is here. This motor was built to go be drag and drive capable. That's why the 55 millimeter cam, that's why the 904 lifters, that's why 1/2-inch push rods. I mean, this thing is built for valve train beef. And, you know, if you understand engine dynamics a little bit and stuff like that, you'll know why the 55 millimeter cam and the big push rods and the big lifters are advantageous in that situation. If not, find some videos on it. It's a lot to explain. But, so this motor is really designed to go be a drag and drive, you know, motor. This thing is built for longevity. That's why it's got, you know, good parts. Again, I am not claiming that this thing is top shelf anywhere. The workmanship is top shelf, 100%. Check out Foxwell Motorsports. That guy is he's a guru of many things, but when you get into seeing his cylinder head work and his valve train and stuff like that, and then the meticulous extra little machining, this thing has lateral gas ported rings. I mean, the pistons are gas ported. The rings are also lateral gas ported. I mean, the machine work on the rings in this thing, guys, he built fixtures in his machine shop to hold the rings. I mean, to do the machine work he wanted to on them. So the hours that went into something like that, I mean, that kind of attention to detail, you know, you don't get it everywhere. And Foxwell was just an absolute outstanding character to work with. The guy's a friend for life. Him and I have known each other via the internet for a long time. We've talked a lot, and we've talked about this motor a lot, or something, you know, something along those lines for years. So anyway, dyno, I don't want to ramble. 5,000 to 7,500. They rolled into it at 5. It was making 720 foot-pounds of torque. And I'm going to pull up the dyno graph on the Weber nuts. Hang on. Okay, I'm a little bit of a Luddite, so this is the only way I know how to do this. Let's see. That's engine RPM, horsepower, torque, and the lower graph down here, this is oil pressure. You know, and the variance there, that's 65 to 67 pounds. So that whole sweep, that's a 2 psi difference. Now, on this graph, you can see 700 foot-pounds, and we carried 700 right out here to about 5,900 or 6,000. Yeah, so somewhere out here. So it pulled, I need to get to the other, there we go. So we made 700 foot-pounds all the way out to 6,400, and they rolled into it at 720. There it peaked at 5,200. Now the fun part is, look at 5,900, 806 horsepower already, and it came out here and it stretched out to 899.9, and it was still making 670 pounds of torque. So you get back here and look at that graph. So we peak here, roll in there, but look at how flat that is. That is area under the curve, ladies and gentlemen. And that is the difference between a dyno queen and a race winning motor right there. This ain't no dyno queen. That thing, I can fuck a shift up by 500 RPM and I don't think this thing is gonna care. This is gonna be a super good, you know, just super good crisp motor. So anyway, you know, we saw the graph. She made 740 at 7,000. It made 899.9. It did that with a vacuum leak. So it was leaking at the pump. We only created 9 inches of vacuum. It should be about 18. You know, so there was a little bit of horsepower there. Now, back on the carburetors real quick. So they were dyno tuning by individual AFR, or excuse me, by dual band AFR. So they had bank 1 and bank 2 AFR. They didn't have individuals. But according to the dyno graph, I think the driver's bank was 11.9, you know, 11.9 to 12.2, pretty rich. And then this bank was about 12.5-ish, you know, right in that vicinity, all the way through the sweep, which, you know, according to those numbers, that's rich. But they said, you know, we wanted another day on the dyno, which we didn't have. I didn't have budget for it. The engine builder didn't have time for it. The dyno shop didn't have time for it. So day 2 on the dyno was not going to happen. They said, we wanted another day on the dyno with these carburetors to learn this jetting, because they said the plugs showed dead white. They said we could hardly get a fuel curve in those things, and we had to throw so much fuel at it, you know, to get it to show any fuel curve, you know. And the AFRs were getting richer, but, you know, guys, the spark plug is the judge, jury, and executioner to what is happening inside that combustion chamber. So, you know, Dominic and I talked about that. We're gonna, you know, learn what these things need. I have an XFI fast or fast whatever O2 sensor system in this thing, and I have my headers. They have O2's sensors available for each tube. So whatever tubes I can get an O2 sensor in the chassis, we will collect that data. We're going to put the O2 sensors and read the averages, and then where I can, because I can't get the O2 sensor in every header in the chassis. It was really meant for dynoing, but we didn't dyno it with those headers. So whichever ones I can get to, which I think I can get to 6 of them, we will take those readings, you know, doing testing and driving and pulls and stuff like that, and really finalize the tuning on those carbs, fix the vacuum leak, and maybe, you know, this thing might respond with a little bit more horsepower. But, you know, they did 15 pulls on the dyno, so 899.9, you know, you're not going to improve on that a whole bunch. They put it through its paces and broke it in well and ironed that out. So had to notch the cross member. We're running a crank trigger now. That's where the crank trigger is going to go. It was going over there, and there was no way it was going to clear. It was a mess. So I got in there, did some welding and some fabricating work, because the cross member, or excuse me, the crank trigger, that protrudes, that bolts the front of the motor on either side of the timing cover, and that protrusion right there was getting into that cross member. On a Corvette, the cross member is not underneath the oil pan. It's underneath the balancer. And that's part of why the street race and the no prep guys are starting to really fall in love with these things, is because the number one spark plug is about a foot behind the spindle center line. Very short drive shaft, 28-inch drive shaft. Yeah, literally, the drive shaft in this thing is like the size of a baseball bat. I can't remember where I stuck it. But you can sit in the driver's seat and reach out and grab the back tire. So the setback, the potential for weight transfer, and the way the car is balanced. So this car is, with me in it, at the time I was 265 pounds. I'm about 235 now. I'm down about 32 pounds-ish. I'm going to try and get down to about 215, 220. But anyway, the weight bias in this car is 51 nose, 49 rear. And let me tell you about that big block. That thing is heavy. This intake, if you lift the intake straight off without these on there, the fuel line, the linkage, everything, just lift the intake straight off, not the distributor, set it aside and put that on a scale, that was 63 pounds. That stuff is heavy. Now that was with the zinc, the old school zinc carburetors, the first Pro systems I had. These carbs are, I think they're about half the weight. These are 3 pounds, those were 6 apiece. So, you're going to take about 6 or 7 pounds total off that, but still, that is 55 pounds on that. So, I could change an intake swap and probably upset the weight bias on this car by that 1%, or even adjusting the 4-link bars and the preloads and stuff like that. You have that ability to move some of that weight around. So, the goal here is to keep this thing out of wheel stands on the track and don't destroy my beautiful oil pan. But anyway, so that's the Chevelle update. It's waiting its turn because this is the main focus now. Really, again, it's Sunday morning. I've been in and out of the shop since about 5 a.m. kind of tinkering, and I'm waiting for the hardware store to open now so I can go get some grade 8 bolts. But this thing will hopefully be running by this afternoon or tomorrow. Fun part is, new neighbors moved in across the street. They've seen me working on that car in the driveway. They've never seen this car. They have no idea this car exists. And I'm about to blow their top off with a 900 horsepower big block where the headers are pointing straight at their house. So I'm going to have to go over and introduce myself and maybe take them a dozen eggs and a jar of homemade salsa to kiss up a little bit so I can try and avoid getting the cops called on me. So anywho, gang, that's where we're at. We are Corvetting it. I'm going to try and get a couple of passes in before the end of the year. Realistically, I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Belts are expired. Chassis cert is expired. That tire has a leak. I picked up a thorn. These tires are a couple of years old. The front runners are just kind of worn out, so I need, $1,000 worth of tires, and my trailer needs 4 tires. So, I've got $2 or $3 grand that I've got to dump into the car before I can make a good pass down the track. And this little booger, you guys remember my precious Beanie Weenies. You guys seen the shop dog. Hi, Beans. Right as this motor was getting finished and I was paying off the final bill to the engine builder, and with the surprise, we need these carburetors changed, blah, 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 that we did right at the end, that dog cost me $4,400 at the vet. And let me tell you, I am not a money guy. I have to stretch these builds out. That's why, if I hurt that motor, I'm going to be down for a long ass time. So coming up with enough money to save my dog's life in May, she got into something poison. We think it had something to do with our bird food. We have parrots, and we learned that there's a certain way that parrot food can ferment, blah, blah, blah. And if dogs can get into it, liver, blah, blah, blah. She was 2 feet in and sitting on a banana peel, boys. So that was a $4,400 vet bill that I had to produce and pay for the carburetors and pay the final bill on the motor, which only one of those 3 things I was prepared for. So it might be just, chill out the rest of the summer and focus a little bit more on the home and the family and stuff like that. I poured money into this thing this summer to make this happen. And, if I'm lucky, I'll get to go make a couple of lighthearted test passes in this thing and just feel it out. But, we will see. So, anyway, gang, that's the update. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this is a lot of talking, yakking, and rambling. We're going to get this thing back together, and then we're going to start getting back into that thing. I don't know if any of you guys know this. The 496 that was in this car that was going in that car. I sold that motor to fund saving that idiot dog. I do love that doggo, but so I don't have a power plant for that now, so I've got something up my sleeve. We'll talk about that much later on. But plan is still on to try to make that car a 10-second driver cruiser / tow rig. Tow this to the racetrack, run 8s in this, run 10s in that, the same night, take it home. That's my bucket list. So, all right, gang, laters.